Okay, so I think it's time we get started. It is 10:01, so there will be a few people joining us as I introduce what this series is. So bear with me if you've heard this introduction before, but we do want to make sure everyone feels welcome and knows, of course, how to use Zoom. So my name's Hayden. I'm the project coordinator at Healthy Tasmania, and whether this is your first, second, third or fourth session, thank you for joining us today for what will hopefully be another great Mentally Well session. We're proud to bring you the Mentally Well series on behalf of the Starting Point Neighbourhood House in Northern Tasmania. So you'll probably know this already, being that you are here, that this online series will connect you and give you some tips to support you and those around you to look after your mental health during isolation and into the future. And hopefully that isolation is starting to be less isolated, if that makes sense. So before we get stuck into this morning, I'd like to remind people that if you missed one of the previous sessions, don't panic because you can watch it back. There are ways to do this, but the easiest way is to go to our Facebook page, I'd probably say, and click on our events tab. And you can also do this via the Starting Point Neighbourhood House Facebook page as well. So the events tab on those Facebook pages. If Facebook or social media perhaps isn't your thing, the recordings are also on our website on the homepage there, which is just healthytasmania.com.au. Now, we know that going online might be a frustrating process for some or many, and it can create a long list of challenges. So we appreciate your patience. So there may be some lag, and we hope you have a reasonable internet connection. So we'll do all we can to make it as smooth as possible for you. And if we do lose you, rest assured, of course, these sessions will be recorded and they'll be located on those pages, which I've just mentioned in the above sentence. So we do encourage interaction for these sessions. So remember, you can chat to us. You can chat to us, the host, and our special guest today, or you can chat to everybody. And you can do so by clicking on your chat tab and clicking the drop-down box and clicking attendees, I think, which is everybody. And of course, the Q&A, which is asking questions relevant to today's presentation. And you can do this anonymously. So if you have any question at all, even if you think it might be silly, it might not be a silly question. There is no silly question. So we will answer them. We'll try to answer them at least, and we'll have stages throughout today where we'll go through your questions. So remember, it can be anonymous. You don't need to put your name to a question. So I think that's really it for now. So today's 45-minute session, the title of today's session is The Best Tools and Apps to Keep You Mentally Well in Isolation. So I think it's now a good time to introduce our panellist and our special guest for today, David. David, would you like to give a bit of an introduction to our viewers about yourself and your background?
Sure, thanks very much, Hayden. So, my name's David Bakker. I'm a clinical psychologist. I practice down in Hobart, but I did my university studies in Melbourne. And actually, I grew up in Launceston myself. And a lot of my research is into mental health apps and online tools for mental health. So today I thought I could run you through some of the tools that we use in this space, some tools that you can use. And then, we can also take lots of questions as we go. So you're all right for us to get started, Hayden?
All right, to get started, and hopefully everyone else is too. We've still got a couple jumping on just as we go. I'll just, if you're new to Zoom, just sing out and just have a play around with it. The main thing is make yourself familiar with Zoom if it is your first time. Hover your mouse over the screen and see all the functions you can do. But remember, you can't be seen or heard. So everybody, you can only see and hear us. So you can be incognito. So it's quite good if you're, not walking or sitting home on the couch or at work or whatever it is. So really handy. But I'll stop talking. That's not what the people are here for, David.
Okay, sure. Okay, well, let's start trying to screen share. I think you might need to enable my screen share there.
Oh, yes.
And then we can...
I think this is a new function.
Presentation underway. Yeah, Zoom is upgrading all their security. It's good.
Yeah. So I'm just going to find where this is.
So while Hayden's talking about that, I suppose we'll start today talking just generally about some mental health concepts, like what's stress, what's anxiety, what's depression, and then we can move on to looking at specific mental health apps. We just look at apps today rather than online tools. And then, yeah, we can look at different apps in different categories. So we'll look at some mindfulness apps. We'll look at some apps for coping strategies. We'll look at apps for thought recording and mood journaling and things like that. And we can talk as we go about how each of them might be useful for different issues.
Yeah, so I can't find the function that allows you to. What does it come up with when you try to share your screen? Does it have something?
It says host disabled attendee screen sharing. And I think Lucy in the comments said 3 dots on his screen should allow you to do it, Hayden.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm a co-host. Yeah,
I made you a co-host, so hopefully that'll. So apologies for that, everybody. Zoom's obviously changing the security weekly because of everyone's using it. So it's I haven't changed any settings from when I set these up. We set these up about a month and a half ago, but it's obviously it's overridden the initial setup. So thanks for your patience.
Well, good. Okay, so yes, let's get started. Let's start off by talking about stress in general. I think that's a really important concept to understand when we're talking about mental health, because not all stress is bad stress. So think of stress like it's a bit of a curve, and if we start at the bottom of the curve, we are asleep, right? We're not doing anything at all. We're not alert, we're not stressed, we're totally out of it. But by the same token, we're not very good at doing anything. Like we can't go and run a marathon while we're asleep, right? But as we start to wake up and as we start to become more stressed or alert, we're able to do more and more. So we're able to make breakfast for ourselves in the morning, and then we're able, to make our way to work. And by the time we hopefully get to work or start work, we might be about here. So we're at sort of a good level of functioning throughout most of the day. At some points, though, in the day, we might get a little bit more stressed, and we actually improve our performance at those points. Like if you've ever been a bit nervous, just a little bit nervous before a test or an exam, you know that can be helpful sometimes, just to tune ourselves in. But if we go over that hump and get even more stressed past that peak performance point, we get all sorts of issues start to occur, particularly if then we get upset at ourselves for being so stressed. And then if we keep going past that point, we can make ourselves quite sick. And so our performance gets worse and worse as we get more stressed. So it's important to, sorry, Hayden?
Is that called the inverted U hypothesis? I think I remember learning about that some years
Absolutely.
ago.
Yep. Or the Yerkes-Dodson law as well. A bit of jargon there. But yeah, essentially it's just helpful to remember that this curve is happening all the time. And it's important to check in of where you are on that curve. Are you at a point where you need to bump yourself up, or are you at a point where you need to sort of relax yourself and come back on that curve? So let's talk next about what anxiety is. There's lots of different sort of types of anxiety, and we feel anxious about lots of different things, but this is one of the main ways to look at anxiety. And it usually starts with a thought, and sometimes that thought is, something bad might happen, and we feel anxious about that. Often it's something bad will happen. The anxiety tells us that it will happen rather than it just might happen. And if we're thinking that something bad will happen, then we'll start to feel anxious in our body. We might start to feel that fight or flight response, if you know what that is. Our heart starts to race, and we start to sweat a little bit more, and all those sorts of things, just like that. And that means that we will start to avoid situations that make us feel like that, because we don't want to feel anxious, right? Anxiety is a negative feeling. So we might start to avoid situations where we feel anxious. But that means that we don't get the chance to learn that the thing that made us feel anxious probably won't happen. So, for example, a lot of people who experience social anxiety tend to think that other people are judging them, or other people think negatively of them, or other people are laughing at them. So they avoid social situations, but that means that they never get the chance to challenge that thought in the first place, and to realize that other people aren't actually judging them and aren't laughing at them and aren't ridiculing them. So the whole thing, that's the avoidance right there. So the whole thing goes around and around in a big loop, and we keep reinforcing that anxiety over time. So to stop that loop from happening, there are several things we can do. And this is usually where going to see a psychologist, or seeing a counsellor, or seeing some other mental health support worker might come in handy. So if we want to break the cycle, we could, instead of avoiding, go and do the feared thing anyway, which is what we call exposure. And if we do the feared thing, then we might learn that the feared thing didn't actually happen. And after some time, the anxiety passed and we felt okay, and it wasn't that bad. We could also break the cycle even earlier, and we could use some relaxation techniques when you start to feel anxious in your body. So that could be things like having a nice relaxing bath, or doing some deep breathing, or getting a massage, just chilling out basically, but doing it in a way that makes our body feel calmer. Or we could go right back to the thought itself, and we can start to challenge our thoughts, think thoughts like, well, what about all those times something bad didn't actually happen? Or what's the worst thing that could actually happen? Are the feelings in proportion to that? So that's anxiety. If you've got any questions as well as we go, please type them into the chat. But let's move on to depression as well, and feelings of low mood. So as with anxiety, things usually start with a thought, and usually it's all sorts of negative thoughts like, I'm worthless, I can't do anything, this is pointless, any thoughts like that. And if we're thinking negative thoughts like that about ourselves, or about other people, or about the world, then we're probably not going to expect many things to be fun or rewarding. And that means that we don't do much, or we do very little, or we don't enjoy the things that we do, and we don't get the rewards out of those things that we would normally get. And if we're not getting any rewards, then we're just going to perpetuate the negative thinking. We're going to expect the same sort of results. And so that cycle of depression can go around and around until we end up breaking it. So how do we break it? Well, instead of doing little, we could do stuff. And I'm not talking necessarily about, just like positive. It can be anything. It can be, doing the laundry, or it can be going for a walk, or it can be just being busy in general. That's often a really good way of breaking the depression cycle. Or we can go right back to the thoughts themselves, and we can start to challenge those negative thoughts with more positive ones, or more balanced ones, or ones that acknowledge your own strengths, things like that. So that's a quick overview of how we might break cycles of anxiety and depression. And I thought before we start talking about the mental health tools themselves, we should talk about some of the therapy sort of models that they're based on. And cognitive behavioural therapy, I don't know if you've heard of that before, maybe some people have, but cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT, is the main sort of therapy that most psychologists use here in Australia. And it's also the one with the most sort of evidence for lots of different psychological issues or mental health issues. And so it's actually also one that is really well suited to online tools and to apps and to self-guided help. So if you find something that's based in CBT or that uses CBT, then you can generally trust that it's got some evidence behind it showing that it might help. So CBT is also a big family of different strategies and techniques and therapeutic styles. So there might be some therapies as well that you're aware of, that sort of fit into CBT, or that CBT makes sense of as well. Cool. Do you have any questions or anything like that, Hayden, before we continue?
We have no questions via the Q&A yet,
Cool.
but if anyone does have a quick question, now would be a good time to quickly get on that keyboard and hammer away. So maybe just give people 15 seconds to type something. If you're not a speed typer, sorry, but we don't have heaps of time with these. The 45 minutes goes really quick. Oh, we've got a question. Here we go.
Okay.
Fantastic. So how do we tell the difference between stress and anxiety?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think they're very closely related, and anxiety is usually about a fear of something happening in the future. So if we think of anxiety as we're fearing something that's going to happen to us in the future, and we're predicting something bad happening, then that's kind of anxiety. Whereas stress is just generally trying to focus our efforts on what we're doing right now. So if you feel like you're unable to cope with what's happening right now, like you don't have the capacity to deal with all the things that are happening right now, then that might be stress. But if you're feeling anxious about something, it's usually more into the future. That's one way of looking at it.
If that is the case, so going with the whole COVID-19 thing, would that mean like a lot of people might be more anxious because it's that uncertainty, isn't it, of what's around the corner? Perhaps more so than the stress, although of course there's going to be stress too with circumstances that are going on with each person. But that was the first thing I thought of, like COVID-19 anxiety, like because of the uncertainty.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Absolutely. I think it's it's more about the anxiety of like, am I going to get sick? Am I doing the right things right now? Am I washing my hands enough? Like it's all that sort of future focused uncertainty. So there's a lot of anxiety. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. So let's quickly, before we jump to the apps, also just talk about the CBT model from another perspective. Let's say you've got an assignment coming up. And you start to think some thoughts about it, like, well, I need to work on it, I better do well, and some thoughts like, well, if I don't do well, I'll be a failure. Like that might be the thought that all those thoughts lead to. And if you're thinking those sorts of thoughts, you're going to feel pretty anxious about your assignment coming up, which means your heart will race, you might sweat, you might have that fight or flight response, and you might try and avoid doing the assignment or procrastinating about it. Now, all of these things are connected. So that's really important to know. Just because you think something means you feel something, and then you do something. Because you do something, you think something, and it all sort of blends in. So we can find ways of helping this situation at each of those points. So for our bodies, we could do some relaxation training, which could do some deep breathing, we could exercise. For what we actually do in response to the anxiety, we could try and schedule our time a little bit better. Or we could try and do some study groups or do something else that we know will help motivate us. For thoughts, we could try some mindfulness techniques. We could talk about the thoughts more openly. We could challenge the unhelpful ones. And for the feelings, we could have a bit of a different attitude towards them. Instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm anxious, something really bad's going to happen, we could say, well, anxiety is a normal and helpful, sometimes, human emotion. So when you feel it, that's okay, it will pass. In the moment, it might feel like it is really severe and really upsetting, but having an attitude towards your own emotions that they're normal and tolerable can be really helpful. Cool. So let's talk about apps. Right, so let's start at the most obvious point, which is mindfulness. Lots of people, when we think about mental health apps, think of mindfulness apps and usually sort of meditation apps. And the first one I've got to talk about is called Smiling Mind. Now, a lot of you might be familiar with this one. This is a one that's made in Australia, made in Melbourne, and it's free and it's really good. So I think this is a great place to start if you're interested in mindfulness apps and ones to use to do some calming meditations. Then Smiling Mind is a great place to start. Now, there are a few others. I mean, there's loads of others really on the App Store and available across Android and Apple. But Smiling Mind is totally free, and most of these other ones have like a paid subscription model or something like that. So usually you would start using them for a bit, and then after a while you might have to start paying for it. So one of those ones is Calm. Calm is great in that it doesn't just have meditations and mindfulness in it. It also has things like sleep stories, so you can like listen to someone talk about a story while you try and get to sleep. It has lots of other relaxation tools in there. Headspace is another one, another mindfulness app that is really good, but again, it's a paid subscription. This one's based in the UK, so if you like British accents, then maybe go for this one. And 10% Happier is one that's based in the US. So if you don't mind an American accent, then maybe go for this one. This is also a really good one in that it has a lot of videos before meditations. So you can learn what the meditation will guide you through, will help. And yeah, there's sort of more of a course structure to that one. So it's a really good one if you wanted to learn more about mindfulness. Cool. So I wanted to breeze through those mindfulness apps because they're the ones that most people are familiar with, but Smiling Mind is a great one to go back to. There's also lots of apps for fitness and for exercise. In fact, there's probably like too many to talk about. There's just heaps of them out there. And we know that exercise and fitness is really important for mental health. So I thought I'd mention these briefly. But there's also one that I think is really special called Zombies Run. Now, if anyone has used Zombies Run, then please let us know. But Zombies Run is great. Basically, you put the headphones in and you go for a run, and it takes you through a story. And for each run, there'll be a different episode in the story. And you are a runner for a zombie apocalypse outpost, and it's your job to go and collect supplies for the outpost. And you have to do that by running, right? And so as you're running along the story, like, you know, people are telling you the story and they're narrating the story and they're referring to you as the runner. And occasionally you will get chased by zombies. So you will start to hear them, and as they grow louder, they're growing closer to you. And if they're growing closer to you, then you have to run faster. So you get a little bit of the high intensity interval training as you're doing it, because sometimes you have to run really fast, and then sometimes you can slow down because you've outrun the zombies.
We just to hold you up there, Dave, we've had a couple of questions. Can you walk with this app? Do you know?
Oh, I'm not too sure. I don't think so necessarily, because it's all built around, you have to run. I'd imagine you could start walking, and then when the zombies come, you have to run. But you can't necessarily just walk the entire time, because then the zombies will catch you. Yeah. So I think it determines your. I've used it a fair bit, and it determines your like base speed. So if you start at a sprint, then you don't have anywhere to go to from there. But if you start at a walk, then as long as you're prepared to maybe double time walk or run when the zombies chase you, then you should be right.
Yeah, maybe start with a dawdle and then see how you go with a bit of a power walk maybe. But I guess you can try it. What's the harm in, downloading it and seeing if it works for you for 10 minutes, yeah?
Absolutely. And that's a really good point. For all of these apps, just give them a try, download them and see if you like using them. We'll talk about that a little bit later as a really important point. Like, you should like using the app. But yeah, trying them out, there's no harm in that. Cool. So yeah, that was the one sort of fitness app that I thought we could talk about. There's also a lot of apps out there for keeping good habits. And we know that that's a really important part of mental health, keeping a good routine and good habits, not necessarily just, behaviors that are good for your mental health, but just keeping your life organized. So you know when you're doing things, and with a bit of certainty when things are going to happen. Now, a great one for keeping habits generally is called Strix. Now, this is unfortunately just available on Apple, but it's just a really nice, elegantly designed app that shows us how a really simple little app like this can motivate us really, really quite powerfully. So on streaks, the aim is to put a whole bunch of things on there that you do every single day. And every day you do them, you go to the app and you press the button on whatever task it was that you did. And it gives you like a little satisfying reward, like, oh, no, I did that today. And if you do all of your tasks in the day, then all of the buttons turn gold, and that feels pretty good. And the idea is to not break the streak. So you try and do the same thing every single day. So one day you might break the streak and you might not be able to, go for a walk, or, simple things like brush your teeth or do a bit of reading or anything like that. But it can be helpful to motivate us to try and do those habits every single day. And after about 30 days, a habit can be easier to keep than before 30 days. So if you aim for trying to do something over 30 days, at the end of that, it might be much more of a part of your routine.
Had a really good question there, David. Is it okay for kids, this app? Do you know, for young people?
Streaks?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a great app for kids. It's really nice and simple, and I think it can help with just some of those household chores as well. There's another app that's actually quite good for kids. I would probably say for this next one, maybe over 10. Or maybe over 12, maybe sort of high school age. This app's called Habitica, and this is a great app that translates all of what we do in our life and our habits and our routines and our to-dos into a bit of a role-playing game type structure. So a role-playing game and an RPG is a type of game where you have a little character, you have a little avatar. You can see on the top of the screen, on the screenshot there. And that's you in the game. And the more like habits and to-dos that you complete, and then the more experience and goals you earn, which are the types of things that you earn in role-playing games. You earn experience points, and then you level up, and you earn goals, and you're able to buy rewards. And if you don't do your dailies, so dailies are things that you should do each day, you lose a bit of health. So there's all these mechanics built into Habitica that can help people be motivated to do things for themselves. So this is a great one that I've used with a lot of adolescent clients that I see as well. But it's just a really nice one to show that all the things they do matter and do count, and it's a bit of fun as well. It makes a bit of a game. You can also have a bit of a part. You can have a party, so your whole family could be on Habitica if you like. You're all different characters, and you all might compete against each other to see how much experience and gold you earn. So yeah, this is a good one that some families have used to compete against each other to see how many chores we can do, but also to do things for our mental health.
I can see how that'd be popular today.
It can be really popular. It's also free. It's totally free, and it's across web and Android and iPhone. So you can use it on your computer as well. It's a great one.
Yeah.
Another good one that is maybe more aimed at adults for habits is called Fabulous. And this one not only helps you do habits that you choose, but also has a whole bunch of little routines and programs built into it that you can follow to improve your motivation or fitness or focus on work, stuff like that. This one I think has a 30-day trial, and then after that you have to start paying for it. But this is a really good one as well, backed by a bit of evidence. Cool. So moving on to apps for mood tracking. This is something that some people like doing, but not everyone. Basically keeping a track of your mood over time. And if you're someone who you have really good days and then not so good days, then using an app like this can be helpful to start to understand the patterns that go on in your life. So Dailyo is a great place to go to get started with this stuff. It's free, and it's a pretty simple and easy to use mood tracker where you can also track what sorts of things you've been up to, and then start to see the patterns that might relate. And there's another one called Sanvello, which not only has a mood tracker in it, but also has a few other CBT-based tools for coping and things. So this is a great one as well if you want to explore like a more of a platform for your mental health, a whole bunch of different tools in it. Again, it is paid, I think, after a certain amount of time, but yeah, you can start for free. Cool. I think Helen, is there any questions that we should answer before we keep going?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. So
Sure.
firstly, before I get to them, I just want to remind people that in the chat box, I've been typing the names of the apps, all the ones that David's been going through. And of course, at the end of today, we'll also put any resources up on where you'll find the link of this recording on Facebook and on the Facebook events pages and Facebook pages. So if you do want to find out, oh, what was that app? Oh, forgotten. And yeah, so we'll have it up there so you don't forget it. But a couple of questions. So the first one is, how do we know when we need to do something about depression versus perhaps feeling a little bit down? So that's probably before the apps, but nevertheless, a good question.
Yeah, great question. I think it comes down to whether that cycle is starting to form or not, and also whether like how you're thinking. So if you're thinking to yourself like, oh, like life's pretty good, but today I'm just feeling a bit down, so I just need to take care of myself today and maybe do something that I really enjoy or get a good sense of achievement from, then great. But if your thoughts have turned a little bit more negative about yourself, or you're thinking quite in a defeatist sort of way, or feeling quite hopeless about the situation, then we might be getting more towards territory that we're in danger of becoming depressed or are depressed. It's always better to try and do something about that before we get to the point where we meet some sort of diagnostic criteria for depression. And depression is very much a continuum as well. It's not necessarily you automatically become depressed at some point. We all sort of fluctuate along that continuum at any point in time. So if you do feel a bit down, then it can always be good to do something that you enjoy or that you know that makes you feel good about yourself and feel positive about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. The next one is, what's your favourite habit app, David, for adults?
Sure. Well, all three of those that I mentioned, I think are great for adults. I used Habitica for a long time as well, through a lot of my studies as well. I think it's a great app, especially if you've got some sort of ongoing project, or if you're at school, or if you're studying something. I think all three of those that I mentioned were good. Streaks, Habitica, Fabulous. Really depends what you want to get out of it. Yep,
great. This one's a really good question. What about if you want to break a bad habit?
Yeah, so I haven't included any apps that focus specifically on that, but there's lots of techniques there. Usually it's about trying to make it as hard as possible to do the bad habit. So putting things in the way of doing the bad habit, or associating the bad habit with something you don't like. So trying to make yourself not enjoy doing whatever that bad habit is. But yeah, maybe that's another discussion. I don't think there are too many apps that focus on that, but you might be able to. There's a great book called Atomic Habits, which talks about lots of those strategies. So yeah, maybe check that one out. There's also, I think it's an audio book as well, Atomic Habits, and there's lots of articles, and I think might be a TED talk on it as well.
Yeah, I have heard of that book. So yeah, I'm glad someone else knows about it. Someone especially that's as experienced and qualified as you. So it goes to show that that I'm not just seeing something that that the experts don't think's good to look at.
Okay, sure, good. Okay, well let's move on to some more apps in that case. And one big part of CBT is monitoring and recording our thoughts. because we know that a lot of the stress and a lot of feelings of anxiety and depression come from what we think. And Mood Notes is a great app that unfortunately is just available on Apple. There's another one that's available across Android and Apple. But it's just a really nice app that has some fundamental CBT techniques in it, where you write down what you're thinking and then you check to see whether those thoughts are accurate or maybe a little bit biased in some way by what you've been feeling. And then you can write down some different ways of thinking about the same situation. And that's a really nice little tool that lots of CBT uses. There's another app called CBT Thought Record Diary, which is pretty self-explanatory. This one's free and across Android and Apple. And yeah, it does the same sort of thing, not quite as nicely as Mood Notes, but it's still in a really good way. Let's move on as well, just because of the time, to some coping apps. And so this is just a little selection of apps that are really good little coping tools. The first one is called Reach Out Breathe. And so this is developed by Reach Out Australia, which is a great organisation based in Australia. And it's just a really simple deep breathing trainer. So this is a great one that people of all ages can use. It's really easy to use. And basically it's a big yellow button. And as you hold down, you breathe in and it takes you through a little animation and the bubble expands and then the circle sort of completes. And then it tells you when to breathe out. You breathe out again and the bubble contracts. And then you put your finger back on the button when it asks you to breathe back in. It's just something to take our attention away from whatever is making us anxious and making it hard to do some deep breathing, and to train us on how slowly and how deeply to breathe. You can also put your finger over your camera if you've got the right sort of phone, and it can measure your heart rate as well. It uses the flash on the camera on your phone to measure your heart rate through your finger, which is really interesting. So you can measure your heart rate and see as it comes down.
Not called smartphones for no reason, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah. It's pretty clever. Yeah, so this one's free, as is this other one, which is a great one for people who find that they get caught in a lot of worry, like they spend a lot of time worrying and feeling anxious about things. So this one's called Reach Out Worry Time, again made by Reach Out. And Worry Time is this great little CBT strategy. It sounds a little bit odd to start with, but it has some good evidence supporting it. Basically, every time you're worried about something, you go to the app and you write down what you're worried about. Now, once you've written it down there, you file it away, and you're not allowed to worry about it until your allocated worry time comes around. And so you've got maybe like 15 minutes a day that you have decided is your worry time. And your worry time is where you sit down and you do nothing else but worry, right? So instead of worrying throughout the day, you're going to sit down, maybe at your kitchen table, maybe at your desk, somewhere, and just worry, which sounds a bit odd when you start to think about it in that way. But what actually happens for a lot of people is they're able to put aside their worries throughout the day, which is an important skill to practice. And then when they get to their worry time, they are like, well, why was I worried about that? That seems a bit pointless to be worried about. So they feel less worried about it. And at that point, you're able to scrunch up a little piece of paper and flick it off your screen, which is very satisfying. Or you might get to the worry time and you're worrying about it, and you're still worrying about it. You're like, actually, no, this is a really big deal. And that gives you a chance while you're sitting down and doing nothing else to make a bit of a plan. So maybe you're really worrying about having enough hand sanitizer. So you might be able to sit down and make a bit of a plan for that, whether it's something that you need to figure out yourself, or some other sort of anxiety management strategy you need to use. But yeah, the worry time helps not only put aside the worries for a later time, but also helps us plan when we do actually have worries. That's a really effective one that there's some good evidence for. Cool, and we're coming to our final app that we're going to talk about, and this is actually full disclosure. This is one that I have helped develop, And this is one that, so we developed it through my, my thesis, and it's now still available for free. It's one that we basically did a lot of research into what sorts of things help in mental health apps. And then we tried to put all of those features together in the one app. And so it's called Mood Mission. And basically when you go to Mood Mission, you say how you're feeling, and it has both low mood and anxiety features in it. So it's not just for people who feel anxious or people who feel low. We know that a lot of people feel both. You say how you're feeling and you rate how that is on a scale out of 10. And then after that, you give a little bit more detail about exactly what sorts of feelings you're going through, whether you're thinking about something, feeling it or behaving in a certain way. And then it gives you a list of 5 coping strategies you can do right now to feel better. So these are called missions, and they're really little short, like 10 to 15 minute strategies that have all been taken from scientific evidence that we know can help whatever problem that you just told the app that you have. And there's heaps of them. So there's lots of exercise, and there's mindfulness meditations and smiling mind, and little exercises you can do, to dance away the blues. In fact, there's over 200 of these sorts of missions built into the app. And the more you use the app, the better it gets at selecting what sorts of missions you should be using, because after you complete the mission, you again rate how you feel. And so the app's got a machine learning algorithm in it to start tailoring, just like your Netflix list can know what sorts of things you like watching. The app can start to suggest more helpful strategies. It's got some gamification elements in it, like we saw in Habitica as well. And it's got some help-seeking stuff in there as well. So it'll prompt you to maybe go and talk to your doctor, or maybe contact a support organisation if it thinks that you're in need of that support. Cool. So that's Mood Mission. Again, free across Android and Apple. And I'd love to hear any feedback that you have about that app as well, because I'm in a little bit more of a position to take that feedback on board and to try and change it for the better. But that's a good point as well. Like if you are using one of these apps and you think, you know what, it would be much better if this part of it was different, feel free to reach out to the developers of that app. They usually have a website that you can submit something across, and they would really appreciate you giving them that sort of feedback. So to finish up, there's a few things to consider before you choose a mental health app. And those things are, well, is there any evidence for it? And if it's based in cognitive behavioural therapy or CBT, like if it says on the app description it's uses CBT, then there's probably good evidence for it. Is it interactive? Like, is it just information, or is there a back and forth between me and the app? Can I use it when I really need it? Like, does it only let me use it once a day, or can I use it on the bus? Or can I use it in the situations when I want to use it? And do you like it? That's probably the most important thing. If you like using it, if you enjoy using it, then you are going to use it more. And that's what we want to be doing when we're engaging in these strategies more. Cool. So I thought we could finish with any leftover questions. And thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, great. Thank you, David. I'm sure everybody's clapping. I'll do a little clap. There you go. Thank you. So we probably have a couple of minutes for questions, just because we did start a couple of minutes past 10. So now's your time, everyone, if you have any questions on those apps, and there were quite a lot of them, and I didn't realise there were so many, David. So it goes to show you what's out there, and I'm sure there's more as well. So thanks for sharing all that. Just as I'm paying attention, I'm just looking through the chat here. We do have a question. How often are clinicians using apps as part of their practice?
That's a great question. It really depends on the clinician. There are some who probably don't use apps much at all, and others who, like myself, who try and use them in every available opportunity. It should really, though, depend on the person that that clinician is seeing, and apps are only really useful if the person is going to get something out of them. So, you know, I work with a lot of people who use their phones a lot, and so for those people, using an app might be a good idea. But other people really prefer pen and paper, or they prefer something a little bit less technology based, and that's probably a better solution for those people. So it really depends. And I suppose another good point is that none of these apps replace seeing a clinician or seeing a psychologist or anything like that. They're all just little tools to help with mental health and well-being. Some of them can be used in conjunction with therapy. Most of them can be used in that way, but yeah, they're certainly not replacements in any way.
Yep, great. So at 10:47, with no further questions, it seems. Well, time to thank everyone for attending again today. So yeah, once again, I'd like to thank David Bakker for a really great session. Next week, we have stress management, which is the final session of this 5-week series. So, you know, whether you know someone who would find this stuff interesting, let them know about it. It doesn't matter if next week's their first session of the 5. As you know, if it is your first or second or third session today, you know, you can jump on and learn something. And of course, you can give us feedback, which you can do at our email, which is just admin, ADMIN, @healthytasmania.com.au. And of course, we will share any resources or relevant information that's come out of today on those Facebook pages we mentioned at the start, where you can find the past recordings as well. So without further ado, thanks everybody. David, did you have any final word for our listeners or viewers or whatever they want to be called today? Both, I guess.
No, just thank you for listening, and and feel free to send me an email or to send. You can go to moodmission.com. You can also send a message there, which I will read. And I look forward to getting back to you on that.
Great, thank you. Have a really good Wednesday, everybody. Enjoy the start of winter wherever you are, and we'll see you next week on the 10th of June for stress management, 10 o'clock.